empowering all countries to eliminate the root cause of violence, which is nationalist threat construction. The fourth argument is that Japan in the status quo is poised to launch missile defense systems because of North Korea's missile development, which means that the discourse in the status quo is universally unipolar. The point is these plans solves. Our first argument is the plan is absolutely key to taking a positive peace approach to politics. The eighth point of the plan is key to providing and empowering countries to develop a different mindset outside of the offense-defense paradigm that exists in the status quo. The visa point is also that the world is currently tit for tat. We envision a world where missile defense is unnecessary, and we understand that it's purely motivated by the enemy other. We are sensitive to the material reality. Do not ask for any kind of security things in return. We do not say that we are going to conditionally stop our missile defense system if we can bolster our military somewhere else. Or we don't say that we should stop our military defense system if you stop your military defense system. Instead, we embrace the concrete and the particular. And we say that we will do it no matter what unilaterally. The second argument is that offensive realism necessitates military buildups. The misdirection of spending is happening in the status quo, where we throw it down the drain in pursuit of the fantasy of being the strongest military country. We spend twice as much as any other of the next 15 countries combined, which is the reason as to why the spending is currently misdirected in a major way. The third argument, the pernicious military-industrial complex had $832 billion that is spent in the status quo, which is $252,500 that we could give to every single person in the United States. These are people who are starving on the streets. These are people who cannot afford jobs, people who cannot afford food for their families either, which is the reason as to why the pernicious spending is always going to be a problem that only the plan can solve. You see one of the impacts? Our first argument is that the anxiety and paranoia of war is an independent reason to vote for the affirmative. Islamophobia is real, and the construction of a threat instigates infinite scapegoating. The second argument is that this is the root cause of violence in a world where we are constantly able to engage in threat construction. We constantly otherize certain groups of people as things that we should eliminate for the good of national security, or we otherize people as having an instigative tendency to attack the United States with missiles. So we must defend with better missile defense systems. This only leads to a vicious cycle of overspending on different programs without paying attention to the material realities that exist in the status quo, which leads me to the third impact. These social programs that are not being funded in the status quo. In a world of government shutdown, this is especially exacerbated, but in a world where people are not able to get food and unemployment is currently set to be cut at the end of the year, the military-industrial complex is a straight reason as to why we must eliminate that, and we must embrace a positive peace approach in order to understand and reframe the way that the United States sees ourselves in connection to the rest of the international community. Yeah.
How do we know things are not threats?
I mean, we are basing things on material realities. Yeah.
So what is the material reality of threat then? How do you know that? What's the question?
Advantage 2, I said big argument here. Advantage 2 is 1,000 paper cranes. 1,000 paper cranes is the story of Sadako and 1,000 paper cranes that she made after the war. She developed leukemia from the radiation that happened after World War II, and from the Japanese tradition, she set out to make 1,000 paper cranes. Because in the Japanese mythology, if you make 1,000 paper cranes, then you or your community is able to make a wish. And she was able to make hundreds of them, but she died before she could finish. Our argument is that this is the central narrative of post-war Japan. This is the reality of nuclear missile-based politics. It is not a chess game of international strategy, but it is one girl, it is children who are innocent and had no responsibility for what occurred. Japanese foreign policy now has abandoned the vision of Sadako. The push to abolish Article 9 and the reorientation of politics to engage in a new missile defense system is a shift back to offensive realism and forgetting what it does to individual people and the narratives that they create. This reorientation is particularly bad because it renders lives like Sadako as unbelievable, intelligent, invisible lives. The visa point is the plan solved. Our plan is a reorientation of Japan's attitude towards security. We reaffirm the suffering that realism causes to individual people on the individual level, and we posit that the only way that you can actually understand the ungrievable harms that exist in war is by existing and understanding them in the material world. We are sensitive to material reality and embrace the concrete and the particular, not the constructed threats that exist in the status quo, and not the ones that realist countries act upon in order to otherize groups of people and forget their narratives. And above all else, the story of Sadako is one of hope. It wasn't just her, it was her family and her community who held on to the hope that something as simple as making an origami crane could engender change that would actually impact the real world. Hope is good, and hope is humanizing, is our thesis. It allows us to break our frame from the frame of realism, and this is the type of three that breaks the vicious cycle of war that exists in the status quo. The CISA point of the impacts. Our first argument is that we are able to actually create real values in life in a world where nobody is able to trust each other in the international community. We are constantly making tit-for-tat arrangements. We will decrease military security if you are able to decrease yours as well, or we will increase it if you increase it. fighting on the next day. Our argument is specific to this, that people are able, at some point, to have hope in the other side, empathize with them, and create true, lasting ceasefire. So this affirmative is our willingness to trust others. It is a commitment of the United States not to resort to the realist prisoner's dilemma, and our commitment to hope now and forever in the future.
Okay. We're just going to be two off. And then manage one, manage two. It's just two independent sheets. Okay. Anybody not ready?
First off, suspect the 8 points that you must specify your framework for evaluating impacts of these points that they do not give a way in which you should weigh impacts through not benefits, i.e. that is a very ambiguous notion. They do not give you a way in which you must look at this either a policymaker framework or some sort of critical lens to point the standards. The first of which destroys LC ground arguments of the world, in which you would allow the NG to specify these sort of things. It means that they could just straight turn our offense in the EMO as we would have to make new framework arguments. The second of which is it prevents engagement in clash with the LC is the key speech. If they ultimately undermine our ability to ultimately have or engage in clash with it, it ultimately destroys our ability to keep this is voting issue fairness, as it means that we will never debate. You would also reject new MG framework arguments because it would mean that we would argue that it would be impossible for us to evaluate what those sort of arguments mean when that benefits a paradigm. The next off is to disabuse the means that the United States cancel missile defense within India. The status quo. The first argument is the Bush administration ultimately stopped plans for missile defense in 2007. The second argument is that Obama's indicated that India is ultimately an option, but is not likely to pursue that as in the context of East Asia PIP, which the status quo of the East Wings at least. The first argument is that the plan ultimately shifts missile defense to India. Arguments that a world in which the United States got rid of Japan, we would still try to contain China in an alternate dimension or an alternate sort of understanding, which means that we would ultimately increase the BMT when in India the second argument that military pressure will ultimately reallocating existing forces, i.e. the fact that these sort of contracts already exist and these sort of air cruisers already exist, which is an impetus in which the United States military, which is ultimately pushed to try to include them in India in the status quo in the future. The third argument that other nations in India and Asia would ultimately push for Indian missile defense arguments that they ultimately want us to put it in Central Indian Ocean arguments that Obama will ultimately have to fill the vacuum due to the pressure, which means that he would ultimately increase that sort of missile presence. The fourth argument that contracts ultimately they would have to go elsewhere. In fact, these sort of contracts with Raytheon and Lockheed Martin already exist, which means that the United States is opposed to just having stockpiles ultimately deploy them to India. The fifth argument is that Aegis BMD will ultimately go to a different theater. Right? The fact that the United States currently has these within the specific within the Asian continent arguments that shifting them away would be problematic. These points that India BMD is bad. The first argument is because Indian aggression arguments that creates a center for arms control and ultimately arms control, which would be indicated by India would ultimately being willing to take an aggressive action. The fact that if India now that's secure, they would be more likely to pursue an aggressive foreign policy towards Pakistan. The second argument that missile defense would ultimately be stabilizing the argument for the region is ultimately extremely volatile. The third is that Pakistan will lash out because they don't ultimately feel like they would not have the ability to defend in a circumstance which India could ultimately use them as cover for strike. These ways the impacts first that India-Pakistan war ultimately causes extinction arguments that the fact that there would be nuclear weapons would ultimately require the United States to intervene in this context as well as other countries, which would ultimately escalate that conflict. Second argument that terrorism ultimately causes extinction through retaliation. Directive 17 arguments that Pakistan would likely pass on their weapons to violent on-state action. Third argument that changing the Aegis theater lapse insurance, which ultimately means that Aegis will no longer access to insurance for Russia and China, means that war becomes inevitable. Your question?
Yeah. Please clarify the terms.
Yes. Frankly, if you make arguments of why deontology comes first, then that would be a problem. Arguments that policy means utilitarianism, but the other framework is
So isn't that a framework?
Advantage one. First argument that there is no solvency insurance. Argument that allies are not developing BMD within the status quo. However, there is an impetus for Italy, France, and the United Kingdom to do so. Arguments that the change in the posture of the United States ultimately causes those countries to develop, which would be comparatively worse, and ultimately mean that any sort of circumstance which Russia or China would feel contained by the United States will ultimately be comparatively worse because they would have multiple systems that would have to deal with. The second argument, no solvency insurance. Argument that Aegis development or deployment to the region would be comparatively worse. You can cross by those analysis from the DISAD. What way ultimately they would force Aegis development Aegis deployment to occur within the Asian peninsula or within the Asian area or within the South China Sea. That specific context means that would be far more likely that the United States would pursue an aggressive foreign policy in the future. Third argument that no solvency in turn. The United States ultimately put it in India, which makes it more tenuous. You can cross by that analysis from the DISAD. The fourth argument that the United States Japan security agreements ultimately solves the affirmative argument that there's a trilateral agreement with China and status quo. Ultimately decrease the emphasis for the nuclear option argument that Caroline Kennedy has indicated. It is likely that these sort of issues be resolved within the next week. Arguments that the plan destroys this kind of component because Japan would ultimately feel the impetus back out, which ultimately causes regional war. As these small-scale scenarios, specifically those in the Philippines, which the MNLF is willing to overthrow the government, or that and the resurgence of the Tamil Tigers within Sri Lanka, would ultimately create an impetus for international conflict. Next argument's turn. Plan ultimately causes Japan rearmament arguments that the security dilemma does hold true in a world in which Japan ultimately felt like the United States was no longer in the back. They would be likely to pursue these sort of BMD systems within the status quo. You have to remember that Japan has ultimately asked for a BMD system, which is the impetus that in a world in which you were to implement the plan, it is likely they would pursue their own systems. The next argument's turn. Plan creates an impetus for China to ultimately make land grabs arguments that Japan is ultimately seen as not having the back of the United States or any sort of agreement, or they would ultimately make land grabs for copy. That creates an impetus for international conflict, as there is no international agreement for being able to resolve this issue. Next argument's turn. The deployment of the H cruiser ultimately creates the guise of perceptually Japan has BMD argument that in a world period to create H systems within the region, it'll look like Japan has those, but it is not necessarily true, which means that that would create an impetus for countries to be pursue a more aggressive policy towards Japan. Next argument's turn. Plan decreases Obama credibility argument that it's a flip-flop, as it is demonstrated that Obama is going to get rid of his proposal argument that this ultimately decreases international credibility, allows for Iran to proliferate and ultimately develop nuclear weapons, because it is indicative of the reason is why Obama is going to give in to self-led international pressure, ensures that nuclear weapons development inevitably occurs, ensures the entirety of the firm ensures that there is new impetus for nuclear development and a nuclearist epistemology in the future. The next argument's turn. Plan decreases CM argument that there ultimately causes military freakout arguments in a world in which the military is ultimately asking for missile defense within that region. This juncture between the civil and military regions ultimately causes the collapse of American hegemony, because it indicates about why there would be a disharmony between the United States and the military, which means that we would not be able to stir war because countries do not feel like the United States will willing to crack down. The next argument is that turn and cause ultimate development of space-based BMB, the fact that the United States was pushed out of a specific land-based system that it creates the impetus for the United States to develop space-based systems like brilliant havers would be comparatively worse and ultimately create a new system for conflict over space, which ultimately turns the advantage. Next argument is that realism is never the subpoint is anarchy, i.e. the fact that anarchy is not what states make of it. It is a static structural condition that exists that you cannot get rid of, which means that in a world in which anarchy exists and there's no monopoly of power over discipline, ensures that states ultimately pursue aggressive foreign policies towards the other because they cannot ensure their own stability. These ways that rational action theory means that a security is the key issue in which states preserve because of these sort of inevitable tendencies, and that is a reason why states will ultimately act in accordance with realism. The sixth point is the offense-defense divide. The plan does not be able to resolve these issues, and is ridiculous to think that breaking away from BMD in one sense to be able to overturn 400 years of precedent in international politics. Arguing that if this was true, then the United States would have overcome these issues whenever we got rid of BMD in Poland and Marshall. But that's true. But next argument, there's incomplete information, which means that we would not be able to resolve these issues. Next argument, the realism is inevitable. Constructivism cannot replace arguments that if it were true, we're not sure what the alternative would be next, is that threat constructions are ultimately real. Arguments that threats are ultimately real and exist, and denying science would also mean that it creates the impetus for global warming to inevitably occur, which causes ocean acidification and extinction, because there would inevitably be a world in which oxygen would deplete. We are 20% now, we're going to 19%. Also means that we cause extinction and social spending is inevitable. The gun bird limit is not a argument that is empirically disproven by 40 years of social scientific research, and the policy is not solved, or the plan does not solve the abandonment, does not indicate that advantage to. First argument, the context of the policy framework means that that means the policy of the plan is ultimately sees Japan as a docile nation, which means that they cannot attack grievances, specifically those within Russia and South Korea. Arguments that this ultimately fits the dominant narrative of emasculizing Japan, which ultimately means that they are more likely that they ultimately pursue more aggressive foreign policy in the future. The second argument is that there is no framework to evaluate these sort of impacts. The third is that they do not solve the ace points. The United States still has bases in the region that are based upon objects of deterrence. But the base points in the United States has missile defense elsewhere, which means that these sort of issues still exist. The next argument is that the opening of the firm is not solved because of realism. interpretation only for these to specify policy framework of interpretation to specify policy framework of the interpretation. Anything else what we do when clarification which uses the entirety of RPMC which is correct for gender off, but also next time pointing over to check back you. Go to ask the question resolve the entire ground, but also your clarification would cause us to read 7 minutes of policy way analysis use the entirety of the ground. Also make evidence so we will be making policy arguments away within the context policy which means to strategy, but also we have a right to left way arguments and way arguments. The next feature means there's no new students in terms of office, there will be no framework shift, but we will make impact prioritization arguments. We have the ability to make impact prioritization to adjust to the next feature. We'll operate under policy. We can make a probability match arguments, which means it's absolutely critical for our ground where we're the negative. Negative is more ground, just makes they have more genetic strategy and also get the block, but also which class was the argument which means we solve your predictive standards, but also solve your ground standards because actually we're able to clarify the policy officer of this has also used to default to reasonable computer based race by mostly elevated information also easily to order and over allocation of theory. The thesis of our argument is a way in which realism function the status not only makes more inevitable, but also ignores the plight of Indian function within the realist frame. Reverse argument is your specific premise, the way in which India and Pakistan will only make your impact specifically inevitable. The posturing of realism makes your impacts inevitable, which means that the case is actually critical for solving the root cause of this has its mirror to signal the realist frame. The reason why realism happens is the first agent problem, the fact that people don't understand how actors react specifically to the context of security development, so people will always militarize. In a world we're able to signal to other people that we actually adopt a positive approach to cause people to back down. We can solve back this independently outweighs the entire case because we solve the root cause of system. We are getting systemic violence this time, which means you don't solve for us, so we solve for the root cause of impacts, which means you could never initially you can see the argument which is critical to engage together, which is the root cause of all your impacts go to the measure. First argument you say, at least in conversation with Russia, the first argument is the plan actually be able to solve back because Russia, the reason why Russia's going to war because they don't know the United States' intentions over securitization over this is a specific type of appeasement that actually led to the end of the Cold War. The issue they were back down to Russia, went back down as well, which means we would actually solve, you say, there is no ability to solve back for this policy because people are predicated realism. We have made the arguments wide and directly breaking away from the construction of realism actually able to solve the back arms and realism true every single instance of cooperation which has the real frames, the reason why you don't get any solve to your back, but also you make an argument why they still have basis, not true, even if they still have basis in the region, is the signal of the United States specifically context and missile defense system shows that the United States is willing to back down, but also nationalism triggers to impact war when they used to back down and actually allowed for us to walk away and actually gives leaders a way out, but also you make the arguments why this still exists and truly solve this instance. But our arguments we control uniqueness in a world where realism dominates politics, so it's try or not really for actually solve the entire state. So you say realism true, we have already answered why realism also you said the empathy impact, which is the narrative, which is actually critical to understanding how people relate. This is the empathy argument solved. The root cause of their dislike is the world we actually empathize, engage with the other, to overcome the ability of realism to function this task, which we solve that for the entire impact. This is the root cause. Argument you say, yeah. But you say no framework for evaluating, but we say this is a policy. We operate a policy which say that states will specifically identify the U.S. as backing down. This is empirically verified in the Cold War and corresponding values to analysis. Go to the first argument is you say this would lead to the first argument is you specifically say that allies are not rebelling stats. So the first argument you have to see these are China specifically arguments we so strong to like you say it's actually this would actually lead to instruction being for the worst. But you can see solve the arguments we're able to solve that. The realism plan to frame you can see the root cause reason why realism have cross-applied the argument that realism is based on a first factor moves. We were able to solve that information instead of what you say. Solve this industry that leads to deployment in South China Sea. But you can see that the reason why China wants to go to war because they feel the United States is specifically encroaching in the region, which means we saw the root cause specifically China is focused on economic measures as evidenced by human China. As you see, they as if they're concerned by economic measures, not necessarily realism moving to war. Or US facts out there, research actually set away from those rates, but also you make an argument for why we're going to solve because we shift in terms of India. Absolutely not true. There would be no deep reduction in terms of India because the United States doesn't feel the need to militarize the world, or they actually break away from real standards to India and Pakistan won't feel that there's a constant arms race. The reason why wars now because both sides bundle arms in the conflict, which makes arms flow through proliferation inevitable only by solving the root cause by walking away from real standards to solve these impacts back. And also you make the arguments why you will not be able to solve the affirmative. The first argument you conceded the entirety of our solving is blocked by whether the information solving block is actually allowed or information clarification which solves back for the entirety of your arguments. Also you make the argument that to the root cause of the Philippines, but you have conceded the reason why Japan is regressing the status quo is because the information is chemistry. The United States did not pose a threat to Japan in World War II. It was rather Japan's construction of the United States is a threat to the legend of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which means to read and we break away from the real story to be able to solve this battle. Also you say the current plan causes more real disaster, not sure we control uniqueness, which means
there is the use for the way they're military only risk of breaking through the small walls. You can see solves the arguments and cross-way information argument here, but also usage Japan's rearmament, that's yes, that is our these arguments, which means there's only risk that we can actually solve for the entirety. You make the argument that the China's going to lead to land grab, you can our the Chinese, there's absolutely no risk of the Chinese land grab because we just all the information essential. Also, using Japan, it would be developing the BMDs, but you conceded the solvents are the ability of everything is able to solve that for the harms which we actually solve through the cost of Japanese sentence, but also you make the argument that the arguments that actually lead to more proliferation in terms of realism. Not true. Our solvency answers or solvency's answer because of information essential. Also, you dictate this takes a lot of credibility. Not true. The first arms are already backed away from its orientation towards zero, which means there is no trade-off in terms of Obama credibility. Well, at least only increases Obama credibility. What is he's procedures backing down, which means other countries want peace in the region with there's no risk of war. You say this leads to a time of nuclear epistemology. Really risk of solving nuclear epistemology to break free. We can understand. You say civil military relations is key to positive having the first part. We solve the cause of civil military relations where we change the mindset of the way that which means there's no reason why to go and attack the world. We're going to solve civil military relations. Also, is an impact because it will the president actually controls the military. There's no risk of a backlash. It won't go to over rationalists. The cost of war is absolutely high. But also, the next part was you say in terms of space-based missile defense system. Not true. That is the unique start of this task of the world. We actually separate and break away from the military. There's no reason for space defense because the U.S. signals that they will not militarize, which means there's no risk of space defense system. And Andy can answer your question. First argument, you said this is anarchy. First argument is the alternative is absolutely not anarchy because this is actually not anarchy because we actually allow for cooperation with solve entirely the anarchy arguments because also any instance of cooperation would actually break rational, would break the Bill's frame, but also anarchy doesn't happen. It's empirically verified with cooperation and things such as the United Nations, which means empirical evidence or science is also saying it leads to rational action. The first argument is cooperation is able to solve the fact that countries actually cooperate specifically using such a soft power trying to train and trying to restore relations is an indication that realism is not the focus. The only way to solve is by breaking free. But also you say would break free actually lead to widespread concentration across the pie. The arguments that we break, this doesn't cause more war because we control unique. There's no unique for arguments. You say it leads to incomplete information we solve. Incomplete information in the world we actually give you, the world of the United States signals to other countries that are going to be able to do this also. You tendencies of concentration, there's some growing threat of war, this has to go across on the arguments. These are the same arguments are overview answers back because we solve the root cause, which is empathy and information signal propaganda. First argument you cross by the order this the first the only argument based on the reason why militarization had this task force specifically U.S. orientation over the ballistic defenses leads other countries, specifically Indian tax centers, they are going to war because the U.S. is buying the weapons in the world, or the first link is the world where the U.S. is able to break away from these instances. The world where the demilitarized actually leads to less proliferation. Ours is proliferation is the root cause of conflict because it actually allows people with weapons to get their hands. Actually, we saw the root cause of proliferation. We saw the root cause of proliferation because actually allow for a clarification of the U.S. stance specifically. Which means they have better information, which means it'll solve back. All this is there isn't an impact here because we solve back to the root cause. Ours is we solve back to the root cause. There's no unique square argument.
So the order's going to be framework spec, India descent, like their overview that they actually flow separately, which is yeah. So the way it goes is that there's that global overview, the preemptive strike advantage, and then advantage two. That's good.
Framework spec, we're not going for it, but if there's any time in this debate that gets a little blippy, remember that their interpretation was that point of order solves but didn't take a point of order within the MG, which means you must leverage the offense that we're going to pursue with the rest of this round. Do not allow for any new POR extrapolations of some new framework by which we evaluate if it's a policy round. We keep dissent's implementation with have been cold conceded. India dissent. You cannot go grandizing about hoping and conceded dissent, indicating that other actors don't give a shit. Our uniqueness argument is that India is scared about the way in which United States policy is going to act now, and they want the ballistic missile defense because they perceive China to be a threat. Not China
military does not suddenly demilitarize, but rather shifts this gear. They do not have any answer to the trade-off argument under the same root cause 1,000 times. Our argument is that this is to understand the way in which the basing operation will still exist. They do not have an argument as to why the military would dissolve itself, which means you have to give credibility. Link debate. They've conceded a couple arguments. What is the military pressure indicates that there will be a reallocation of resources. That over extends foster hope argument because there's no mechanism by which hope can happen when they don't even grab the second. You can see the other Asian nations who push for BMD because their notion of hope is actually having security, specifically the Central Indian Ocean. You've also seen that the contracts exist in the status quo. You don't give an argument about as to why you sever the contracts with these money will be getting funneled to those other places. You say the United States breakdowns proliferation. No, it doesn't. The money and the funding exists in the status quo. You have no way to override that. You say you solve the root cause of proliferation arguments that that's not true. The ages BMD would merely be moved to a different theory, which causes and you have to pursue proliferation, which in terms of the F. You say that the U.S. military is the root cause of militarization. I think this is rather generous of the United States. No, it's not. Other countries have their own incentives and their own histories due to the fact that they have had conflicts in themselves. I still think the United States is the only actors of broad brushstroke, which misundermines the way in which other actors are solved. The second step that's also ethnocentric doesn't understand the security apparatus that is going to happen. Also probably turns your argument. You can see the couple arguments that BMD, that region would destabilize the region because it causes massive respiratory strikes against India and Pakistan, the interlinked status, extinction, overrides our arguments because extinction happens before your damn hope argument. Conceded interlinked means our time frame for this analysis immediately after the plan happens. Vote conceded and one of the agencies will not be effective deterrence, which means look, other countries still think that even if the United States is peaceful now, Russia is not. And I think their recent relative human rights abuses, the fact that they hate your people and people of color, probably gives a reason why they have a good damn reason why Russia will be aggressive. That nation goes through conflict. Doesn't matter what the United States does. We can give out candies for all we care. We win that debate. They're over. They say realism makes war inevitable. Do not answer the question about whether or not realism will be inevitable, which I'll answer the rest of the flow. Moreover, their version of hope is doomed to each other. International actors say preemptive strikes against each other, and also the status quo results or terminal impact deterrence would prevent the escalation of any conflict from occurring, which means for it, the only ones which have terminal solvency for extinction. You say signal Harvard 3 arguments these ways that there's a perception of what that signal actually means. Just because the United States gets out of the East Asian area does not mean that perception is critical. Ben is the only one who gives the historical example indicating that we were able to remove our BMD out of Europe, but that did not lead to the world of peace. But the peace points that future intentions are critical. Our arguments that even if they think in the short term that our perceptions might be benign, they do not know the future of our intentions, which is critical to the way in which realism operates, because the United States cannot do anything to promise them that in 10 years we will just bother them. But the cease points that arms exist as well, that allows for massive proliferation. You know, solve the root cause. These points you should defer to proximate root causes. It's about how impossible to quantify the way in which root causes are able to operate. And also, there is no interlinked root cause anymore, where you can see in our internal links, which indicates that they have 100% probability, which means you're not be able to resolve that empathy. This not be able to solve. There's no causal mechanism for that to exist. The second is that people think in terms of self-interest. You can see that argument that is an a priori issue because self-interest is critical to building empathy in the first place, which realism would allow for that cooperation. Now the advanced workflow. They say they're able to solve for China rearmament. You, however, misunderstand or dissent. Our arguments that the Allies would have to develop. Now our argument specific to the fact that the plan is able to reduce the development of arms, which causes them to have to respond to an arms race. This has nothing to do with the fact that they fear the United States. This is because they fear other people. And you do not read a solvency argument as to how empathy spills over only about United States foreign policy. Moreover, you say realism is the prior root cause. However, we have a couple reasons why realism is inevitable, which I'll go to later. You say that China's economically focused. These point that that's critical to parity power, which is what China's military commanders by slave with the peace points of Japan. This and give a damn is the reason why they'll have to lash out against them. So the United States will not militarize these points. No appearance for that. With the peace points that we have a warrant for why that would happen, because the collapse of civil military relations means that the military would back away from Obama's military strategy. You say Obama would just bring them in, but no, he wouldn't. In a world where he collapses the ability for the military to operate, meaning they would have to do something. They would have public support. You so the term solves the prolific package. We would give a reason why. When you say the plan leads to info clarification, these points that information is not verifiable. The thousands of treaties that have failed in the UN probably prove that information is not something that can be verified. But the second is that future intentions are critical. You cannot know the future position of U.S. action, particularly when we still have armaments. You say threat construction, no link. You've also seen that threats are real, and that denying threats is denying signs through the impact that was global warming, which means we have a dissent to their imperial place. You say that we solve any risk of a land grab. You misunderstood the interlinkage. Japan goes for a land grab to the islands because they feel like their sovereignty is threatened. You only answer China. That is conceded. You say empathy solves, however, I think I need to smack upon the realism debate here. The one is you conceded that rational actor theory indicates that you would have to go from your self-interest because you cannot get in the mind of another state's foreign leader and unless you are the X-Men, which I doubt exists. The second is this notion of paternalism doesn't help with foreign policy. You've conceded the offense-defense divide means that no matter what the United States does, they do not know whether that's offense or defensive. I.e., if the United States withdraws from the East Asian region, they do not know whether or not that's merely to go to another area, which which causes Russia to be able to freak out more. You say we challenge Obama spread bullying though because of Syria. Evidently, the misunderstands the fact that Obama pressured Russia to be able to get a unilateral agreement. Moreover, you say we saw the root cause. It's not ability for you to resolve that root cause. What it does, it exists in the first place. Possible scenarios are critical things to exist. Moreover, you say that the president will shift the military. I answer that above now. Capable of answering. Moreover, you've conceded the argument that if we would shift to Poland, when you say cooperation would be able to break down realism. Realism is the only thing that incentivizes cooperation, because only in realism do you understand the way in which intentions are used to operate, because you base it on your own intention. Absent the ability for that to occur, cooperation doesn't exist. You say soft power is power. That is critical realism. Now the bottom portions on the advantage go conceded. One, social spending is inevitable. No trade-off. It's cool, y'all. That's the only impact they have. Also, that threats are real due to empirical social science analysis, which the alternative to that would be a denial of things like global warming. This is not answered. Threats are real is not answered. You deny the entirety of social science, which eliminates the ability for any good policy, leads to serial policy error, and probably means we stigmatize other people. Moreover, how will we be able to solve deterrence checks conflicts? That's something that's inevitable. Advantage 2. They misunderstand the top part of advantage 2. Our argument is that framing Japan as a state that does not weapons falls into the stereotype of the Japanese population as docile. We have a critical term that goes conceded. You emasculate their leaders by making it seem like they can never have an aggressive action. This was the forefront for why we bombed Japan in the first place, because we thought they were so weak, we ought to show our power. Our argument is that the status quo would be a recognition that Japan has their own place within security politics, and you allow for that ethnocentrism to continue. The turn to this argument means no hope when you're racist. Now, you said the plan's able to solve for Russia. I already given reasons why the intentions would not be able to solve back. You say empirics break away from realism, not an empiric given. You say the single scheme. We've given reasons why the missile defense would merely go elsewhere, which means that we'll be able to resolve that. You say nationalism is inevitable, cultural, and also cooperation will be able to resolve those issues. You say empathy, however, to say in that place where we could be able to solve the change for power. You say policy, however, you lead to bad policy because you frame Japan as a docile body. Moreover, no framework for evaluating the impacts. Don't you? Impact defense means you have to prefer or manage arguments to be able to resolve this issue back. Moreover, the fact that realism exists indicates that people within those specific levers of power would have to perceive in a specific direction. No matter how cool your app is, you have to contest the eternal link before you pretend to read defense. Debate 101 means you lose the framework.
Okay. So the order is going to be the India dissat on top. Then it's going to be the MG overview. Then advantage 1. Advantage 1. And then advantage 2. So India dissat, the MG overview, advantage 1. This is a really easy debate. There are a couple things that must be noted. The first is that the United States has done the plan in the past. We got rid of BMB in Poland. The result was that we put it in Japan. The result of getting rid of it in Japan is we put it in India. That obviously demonstrates that there is nothing about the plan that will uniquely overcome these issues. The second of which is that they are conceding reasons why realism is inevitable. They can make all the arguments for why their one policy action will change that. However, they conceded that is a 400-year trend that must be explained. This sad now. This set ultimately outweighs in terms of case. The one is magnitude. You can extend a reason this is why nuclear war and extinction becomes absolutely inevitable. And a world the Indian is sad. This ultimately outweighs all of their social spending arguments and their 1,000-paper cranes analysis because it's indicative of a reason as to why in great power politics extinction now becomes inevitable. Based on its probability, they've conceded the internal link scenario. They can go on all they want about root cause scenarios. However, 100% conceded internal link scenario ultimately means that you privilege this, and ultimately these proximal scenarios to their root cause claims that are ambiguous at best and ultimately lack of warrant. The cease point is time frame. They have conceded analysis about why specifically the result of the plan is immediate shift to BMB to India. The result of that is Pakistan pursuing more aggressive foreign policy that pursue, and that ultimately causes nuclear retaliation and terrorist attacks. Our argument is that a world in which that occurs, that ultimately shifts the ability of the affirmative to solve because it reinstates a state of war which ultimately prevents us from breaking away from realism. Realism is absolutely inevitable and ultimately bolstered by a period of war. This is empirically demonstrated in the battles to restart Weimar Germany or ultimately the Napoleonic
towards which are talked about in the offensive realism book, which indicates that there is only a risk that time will ultimately disrupt that. The beast ways that turns the inferno cause states to reassert their security. They will have to go for militarism as that militarism is occurring in the status quo. However, that is not specific of our specific uniqueness story about why India is wanting to have a BND in the status quo. However, the United States is not willing to make that investment because we ultimately are focusing on Japan. The only way in which we are able to break away from this is that the United States would ultimately be willing to put in India, and in which we do not have in Japan. They have conceded by reason that is why the United States would ultimately be more willing to shift it to India. When they concede the link debate, it's game over. They do not solve because the United States still has BND within the region. That's a clean kill. At worst, you vote negative on presumption. MG over. There are a couple things I want you to extend, specifically Josh's second set of arguments for why the perception is that they will not be able to solve for empathy because it is empirically demonstrated. They've conceded an empirical analysis about what happened when the United States pulled BND out of Poland in March of last year. They've also conceded an analysis about why these states do not know the long-term interests of states, which is impossible which means that there is ultimately an ethical security element that they will not be able to resolve, i.e. the fact that you have to change the entirety of the mindset of every individual before you can have a spotlight that starts from one state outwards. Additionally, you can go to Invitational one now. I want you to specifically focus on the analysis about the allied proliferation. They are conceding their analysis is not assumptive of our specific arguments, which is just another example of why states would ultimately pursue BND as a result of the plan, which turns affirmative solvency. You can also extend Josh's later analysis about why info is not verifiable, which ultimately responds to their solve for information arguments. Arguments that they will not be able to solve for information because there is a security limit. States do not know why the United States is pulling out of Japan and then putting in India, which indicates that states ultimately act in accordance with realism in the future. You can go to the realism inevitable debate now. They say cooperation breaks the frame of realism. If that's true, then
There's no reason cooperation.
well, that's just a lie. Josh's number 3 argument is that realism is made on the back of cooperation, and that realism makes cooperation inevitable because states have to look at the intentions of other states. You can extend that argument now specifically that cooperation means that realism means that cooperation is inevitable because that is the only way in which you can try to know the intentions of the other state, which means that one instance of cooperation does not solve for realism. And if that is the case, then that is the circumstance why realism would have gone away in the 17th century as opposed to still existing in the Cold War world. On to the issue now, they will not be able to go for this because the world of realism means that you will not be able to break away from these sort of notions in the future. They are also conceding analysis go why BND is absolutely inevitable, and they just make it more worse within the future. Means that they will not be able to solve for their 1,000 paper cranes analysis because they just make these sort of issues in the future. You can extend Josh's analysis about why the Japanese docile.
The order is going to be the theory page, and then an overview, and then the solvency arguments. It's on Ryan's view sheet. Yeah. And then Japan, 1,000 paper greens, preemptive security, and then
Can you do that again? Sorry.
yeah, the spec,
Yeah.
an overview,
Okay.
the kind of overview that Ryan makes in the MG.
Okay.
Yeah. And then 1,000 paper cranes, preemptive security, advantage one, and then your dissent. The affirmative is straight winning this debate because we are going to be able to control the direction of probability magnitude weighing. This is the only argument that I want you to extend on this back page when we tell you specifically that the job of the PMR is that we're always going to be able to tell you what you should prioritize in terms of your impacts. Are you going to prioritize the extinction scenario, or are you going to prioritize the idea that narrative should always have to come first, and the actual individual lives that are 100% probable going to be taken away is the reason as to why you're going to be voting for the affirmative? Additionally, they only put one argument on here about how it's Bolivia, but there is no risk of offense on the page. Not going for it. Going to the overview. Our narrative that we read is cohesive with the idea that the uniqueness fundamentally flows in the affirmative direction. We say that you always evaluate probability first. Realism is not inevitable because Ryan gives you instances of cooperation. Our argument from Jump Street is that even when two countries were at war in World War I, they were still able to cooperate through mutual trust, which means that we are always going to be able to solve back. Additionally, the rational actor theory Ryan makes on the solvency page is always going to be absolutely clear. This is Ryan's overview page where he tells you that rational actor theory is not a good way to evaluate things because it only sticks us back into the prisoner's dilemma, whereby everybody acts rationally, but everybody ends up in a worse situation overall, which means that in a world of control the fact that in a world of realism that you claim to be inevitable, there is only a risk that we solve for the inevitable wars that you perpetuate, which means that in a world where you keep saying that missile defense is inevitable, we are always able to put defense on it. That means that even if you are able to access extinction scenarios, these are non-unique impacts because they are always going to be happening again and again. Even if you defend against this one instance of extinction, you're never going to be able to defend against the fact that realism engenders the conception of extinction continuing to be happening in the world of the future, which means that only in a world where you're able to break away from the realist set, and the fact is that we give you an empiric that shows that there is at least 1% probability of this occurring with the World War I example, that we're always going to be able to win the round. The problem is that they do not read a counterplan, which means that the uniqueness is flowing in the direction of the affirmative. I know that you're go to the Ryan's overview. This is a game winner for the affirmative. We're telling you that getting rid of it in Poland was made tit for tat, and this is gold on respondents who I don't know why this is the place where you choose to go slow at the beginning of your LOR, because our argument is specifically that we got something from Russia not placing missiles elsewhere, which is a reason as to why we are taking out your thumper pretty easily, and also telling you specifically that all of our engagements in the past, this is an argument that goes cold conceded, were made tit for tat. The Poland thing only flows in the affirmative direction because we only did that so that Russia would take out the missiles from other areas, which means that only in the world of the affirmative, when we take out something at a time of unique high stress for the international community, do we actually have a risk of solvency. The framing of our context is absolutely key because they're telling you that this has happened before. The United States has taken out its missiles before, but the bridge scenario that we give you in the PMC is that this is a time of high stress. Japan is now facing a threat from Korea for nuclearizing, and Japan will want the missile system.
This whole break analysis that Japan is afraid of Korean nuclearization, thus the perception of the plan would be different, is brand new in the view.
So the argument that I'm pointing to is number 4 on advanced 1. Japan in the status quo is poised to want a missile defense system because of North Korea's missile development, which means that the discourse in the status quo is universally unipolar towards preemptive security.
No, see, sure, it's like a conspiracy channel.
Additionally, there's going to be a very important argument that's made here when they say that you should defer to the proximal root cause. This is a new argument in the block, which means that I get retorted my argument that you should always prioritize the most distal root cause. Repeat, you should prioritize the most distal root cause. My argumentation for this is that the reason as to why you should always prefer the most distal root cause because the proximal cause means that you can always solve something, but you will never solve for what's behind it. They make no prioritization argument. This is an absolute blip when they tell me to defer to the proximate root cause. They don't say it's hard to determine the distal root cause, and my argumentation is that only by understanding the distal root cause, which is the lack of empathy that perpetuates the system of realism and status quo, can you actually solve for the inevitability of war that's happening in the status quo, which means that in a world where we are winning 100% prioritization of the type of root cause that you evaluate, the distal root cause is always going to be the most important thing in this round. This goes cold conceded also because I have all the answers. Okay, go on to the advantage 2. On advantage 2, the only argument that made here is that we're going to be seeing Japan that we somehow discursively label Japan as someone who is emasculated, but one, we say that Japan is nationalizing its status quo, which is the reason why this is never going to be able to nation. Additionally, you don't impact this out as the reasons why it's not solvency. This is still a policy ground, but we're just telling you which impacts you should evaluate as going to advantage 1. Also extend the value to life arguments. There's no value to life in the status quo in a world where, even if they try to impact out to extinction, right? Look down your flow, all of their impacts say extinction. In a world where there is no value to life in the status quo, only the affirmative has a chance of humanizing giving value to those lives. Even if this is a net benefits ground, we can still determine what a net benefit is, which means that when you say extinction, we can still have the interrogation of what is extinction and why does that matter, which means that only in the world of the affirmative do we answer that fundamental question of being. Additionally, you can extend the World War I soccer match out with the argument this is also going to be functional takeout.